It's that time of year where fresh berries seem to be coming every single week, and just this week we've picked almost 10 pounds of cherries. So I wanted to make sure that I not only made a cherry pie, but that I would make some cherry pie filling that I could can and make later on this summer. What I'm doing right now is getting my pie crust ready. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've measured in 2 cups of flour. I need a half a cup more. What I did was I put in my teaspoon of sugar, and then I have to add a teaspoon of salt. But I've already cut up 1 of 2 sticks of butter. And when I cut up the butter, I cut it up in small squares. I put it in my bowl. And in this case, I'm going to add my last half cup of flour on top so that the butter is not really clumping together at all. By the way, I was just using my easy measuring cup set. So I have a leveler and I can easily scoop the shape right into my flour canister. It just makes life so much easier. Anyway, so you want to make sure you're using a sharp knife when you cut your butter. You want to cut it into smaller pieces. I'm not using a food processor. I'm using the old-fashioned way, which is using a pastry blender. But when I go ahead to put the butter in my flour, I want to make sure it's not all sticking together right away. So that's why I go ahead and sort of layer the flour in between. Okay, so in this case we can just go ahead and toss the rest of that in there. I still need to add some salt. I'm basically just using 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of sugar. It was 2.5 cups of flour and 2 cold sticks of butter. Okay, using my adjustable measuring spoons for 1 teaspoon of salt. And I know we have those big salt containers. I always put salt and coarse salt into small containers that I can easily measure out of, and that way I don't have to take out the big containers all the time. Anyway, I'm using my pastry blender, and I'm also using our glass mixing bowls, which I really like this because if I have to stop for any reason, if the kids are calling me or the phone rings or just something I really have to attend to, I can easily put a lid on this and put it in my fridge. And one of the things I really love is that we have these silicone stretch lids. They'll fit on just about anything. They fit on my bamboo bowls, they fit on my glass mixing bowls, they fit on a lot of my serving dishes, and they come in 3 different sizes, so they're great. But the beauty here is I can take my glass measuring bowls, simply cover it and stick it in the fridge. Why would I do that? Because this recipe, keeping the butter cold, is very key. So once this is all blended together, I'm going to add some very cold water to it. And then I want to make sure that I split it in half because this is basically enough dough for 2 pie crusts, the base, and then I'm going to create a lattice top or some sort of design. I haven't figured out which one yet. But you want to make sure that you make the dough ahead of time and keep it in the fridge for at least an hour or overnight. You could actually even keep it in the fridge for up to 2 days. And then you want to take it out and roll it out to get it in your pie dish. I do have some heads up tips. I am not good about rolling out pie dough on my pastry mat and transferring it to my pie pan. I say I'm not good at it because I know that there's a very easy way out, and it means using one of our super tools, which is our baker's roller, and it has 2 ends because this is the magical end when it comes to using it for a pie crust. Anyway, I'll go ahead and continue to blend up this. I'll show you what it looks like right before we put it in the fridge. Okay, so I basically have gotten to the coarse meal consistency that I was looking for. And by the way, when you're using a pastry blender like this, I usually keep a butter knife or a sharp knife on hand, whatever I use to cut the butter actually, because you want to make sure you're never using your fingers to try to get everything out from between the blades. And this is one of those moments where if you're letting the kids help you, just be careful. Our pastry blender is extremely sharp, and if it's, let's just say I don't want to have any accidents, whether it's me or the kids. Okay, so we had to have some ice water ready, and we're using between a half a cup and a quarter cup. So I filled up one of our easy read measuring cups with some water and ice, and I'm just going to measure off a quarter of a cup at a time. I know I'm going to at least use a quarter of a cup, so I'll start off with that, and then I'll have a little bit more ready in case I need to add that in. So basically we're just looking to blend it all together, and again we're going to be refrigerating this for at least an hour and then rolling it out and getting it in our pie dish. Okay, so I've got nearby my small mix and scraper, which I love, and I think I'm just going to switch to that right now instead of the pastry blender altogether. Let's try to get some of this out. I can come back and get more of that in just a moment. But you're basically looking for it to, when it sticks together, Have one hand clean and ready because quite frankly, you'll know it by the feel. So you want it to hold, and by the way, I've tested a lot of pastry crusts, and this one is by far the easiest and I think the tastiest I've ever made. And I have to thank my friend Katie because she was the one who told me about the recipe. And of course, you just go online and you do a search for Pate Brisse, which is the French words for pie dough. So I need a little bit more than the 1/4 cup of cold water that I started with. And you always want to have that right next to you. You don't want to be running across your kitchen. And then you go to just doing it with your hands because you really need to have a feel for what that dough should feel like. You don't want to make it too wet and you don't want to leave it too dry. So at this point, I'm just going to one hand work the dough until it gets to that consistency that I want. Split it into 2 so that I'm evenly splitting up my dough, 1 for the base and then 1 for the top. I'm going to pat it down into a patty, wrap it in saran wrap, or maybe I'll even just put it back in the bowl with my lid on it and put it in the fridge for an hour. We'll come back when we are ready to decorate the top of our pie.